In the 1850s, the sewing machine was invented. This was the first time that there was the ability to make a continuous stitch using a machine instead of your hand. With this invention came the ability to have dressmaking and being a seamstress or tailor into full-time jobs instead of everyone having to make only the clothing that their family needed. With this, there also came the ability to make larger quantities of clothes, and even more fabrics became available because at this time transportation started to pick up as well. Though they can make different sizes and they can make larger quantities in quicker amounts of time, they didn't want to have to make every single size several times. So what the dressmakers would do is they would make clothing for dolls, and that made it easier to transport to their clients, and their clients would pick out which doll clothes they would like, and they would make it for the person. Haute couture, or haute couture in French, but since we're in America and everyone says haute couture, that's how I'm going to say it, because that's how I've always heard it. It means high sewing in French. High sewing involves intricate amounts of work that is often hands-on, more if not like all, but instead of with a sewing machine. When you're doing hand stitching, it is easier to get into the smaller places, and the sewing machine could rip the delicate fabric. But it also involves more time. The thicker fabrics are used when you're making it with a sewing machine. But with the delicate fabrics like tulle, which is that stuff that nowadays is often on the outside of prom dresses and is all poofy, with stuff like that, it can easily tear because there are holes in the fabric. And with delicate silks, you don't necessarily want to use a sewing machine because that could cause runs or rips in the fabric. George Simonton, a designer and professor at the New York Fashion Institute of Technology, says that the insides are as magnificent as the outsides. This often means with men's jackets, there's usually a really pretty lining that's colorful instead of it just being black and dull. And usually the stitches are so tiny you can't really see them, and it just looks like fabric just kind of melted together. A couture gown takes up to 150 hours, which is usually about 4 months to create. In these 4 months with commercial fabric and designs, you could probably stock a whole JCPenney. The gowns are often perfectly fitted to an individual. They're not mass-produced, which makes it more special. There are many meetings and fittings with the designer and the customer. The first several meetings, they don't even get out a tape measure. They bounce ideas off of each other and go through different designs that the designer's already made. After these meetings and a few sketches are drawn up, they start with the fittings and the picking out of the fabric. After this, they start sewing them and putting them together, and after each part is made, like once the bodice is made, mostly without completely being stitched up, they have the customer come back in and make sure it's all fitted properly. And then once they have the skirt made, they make sure that it fits perfectly. And then once they put them together before completely sewing it up with a zipper or buttons, whichever they use, they have a final fitting where they add all the little touches and snip all the little threads. Um, usually, the designers don't put an exact price on a garment until it is absolutely completed. Sometimes they may give a price range, but usually if you're going to buy a couture garment, you have enough money to where you can wait to know the final outcome. These dresses are so expensive not only because it takes 150 hours to create such a thing, but they use fabrics that are rare and sometimes even imported from like India and stuff like that. The fabric is of the highest quality, and the extra stuff on the outside, like jewels and crystals, are often of the highest quality as well. Like the crystals are usually Swarovski crystals, and the diamonds are usually high in carat. Each designer has 2 shows a year. There's the winter show and the summer show. These aren't the only times, however, that you can get a couture gown or outfit from the designer. They keep a catalog of every single one of their outfits that they have ever made. And the customer, when you're going in to get an outfit, you can even go back as far as the 50s, 40s, 30s, and wear the exact garment or update it to make it a little bit more modern. Case and Thrash says that couture is almost like a private club. And because it is so private, you have to have, if you've never bought a garment before, you have to have a guide into the world of haute couture. These guides usually have several, if not many, outfits from couture designers, but they are well known in the industry and they have relationships with the designers. There are 2 types of fashion. There's high fashion and then there's commercial fashion. High fashion involves haute couture and beautiful clothing that's not quite up to the standards of haute couture because they don't usually take 150 hours, but they're not mass produced. There's usually only 1 or 2 of these garments made, and they're usually in boutiques instead of large department stores. Commercial fabric is, commercial fashion, is more casual. The quality isn't quite as good. I mean, it's not going to fall off of you or anything like that, but they're mass produced and they're sold throughout the world or even the country. The people that sell these type of garments are places like JCPenney, Dillard's, Macy's, even Target and American Eagle and the like. Art is defined in many different ways, and there are many different pieces that could go together to form a good definition. And with each new definition of art, there's more space for things to be called art. Leo Tolstoy says that art must create an emotional connection between the artist and the audience. I agree with this, and we'll use this plus a few additions for art in my paper. Of course, we must have emotional connection to the artwork, because without emotion, we would pretty much be more like animals. Emotion and reasoning are 2 of the main things that separate us from the animal kingdom. But with this emotion, you have to have skill, precision, and the emotion has to be good, true, and beautiful. An example of something that draws emotion but isn't skillful is a young child's finger painting or a stick-figure drawing that you can see on an adult's refrigerator. Sure, the adult may be like, oh, it's so pretty, it's my little kid's drawing, it's got a good emotional connection with me, but But it's not necessarily skillful. Sure, it could be skillful for a 2-year-old to draw a stick figure well, I guess, but it's not skillful in a level such as Van Gogh and Picasso and Dior and Armani. People like that. It's not quite up to that standard. And then you can also have the flip side where there's an immense amount of skill put into a painting or a drawing, but there's no real emotional connection with anyone. This can happen because it may be modern art with a few straight lines going everywhere and it is hanging in the museum, therefore it's called art. But that's not truly art because there isn't any emotional connection in a good to a beautiful way. Usually if there's any emotional connection to that, you kind of just laugh at it. And that's as far as it goes. Art is essential to life, and only humans can fully understand and create art. God made us to appreciate beauty, and because God loves beauty and hates ugly sinfulness, we are meant to appreciate art like His creation. Some haute couture, like other mediums, isn't good, true, beautiful, and isn't really art. You can have a movie or a piece of literature that may be skillfully directed or skillfully written, but there's no true emotion coming out, or there's no connection, or there's nothing inherently good or true about it. It could just show humans and their depravity without any redemption, or it could just not really have a viewpoint. Examples of haute couture that is like this is something that reveals too much of the human body. Instead of respecting it, it kind of disrespects it. Project Runway, one of my favorite shows, just finished its 4th season a couple months ago. This show is on cable, and there are hundreds and thousands of designers that come to try out using their portfolio of sketches and several different garments that they have made. And they have to basically go through an interview process with a panel of Michael Kors, who is a top American designer, Heidi Klum, who is a runway model, high fashion model, and the editor of Elle magazine, which is known to have more high fashion stuff in it besides 17 and things like that. Once there are about 12 designers chosen out of the 100, they start the real series, and each week they're given a different challenge. One of the most memorable challenges from this season was where they had to go to the Hershey store in Times Square, and they were given 5 or 10 minutes to run through the whole store and pick things out to make a garment with. Some people chose pillowcases that said York and Twizzlers on it, but this one girl who won this challenge made a halter, top, and skirt completely out of Twizzlers. This is the kind of stuff that they do. They're usually only given 24 to 48 hours. They have to make their own pattern, which for those of you who don't know what a pattern is, it's the basic outline of all the pieces that fit together to make the article of clothing. They're not allowed to have any fashion books with them, any pattern making books. They can't use the internet, and I don't even think they can watch TV. It's very strict rules, and several people have been kicked off because they have broken these rules. The winner of this last season is Christian. He was 23 years old, and he started fashion design when he was in his younger years, about 11 and 12. He moved to Paris when he was 16 and had an internship with, I believe it was Armani. This gave him a good start on his fashion career, and his garments were always up to haute couture standards, and as he would say, fierce. He always finished first. He won almost every challenge. If not coming in first, he usually came in second or third. The only time he was in the bottom two was once. I'm not going to go into that. That wasn't his fault, though. He had to deal with a high school prom catastrophe. And his final runway show was one of the best examples of haute couture that I've seen out of many runway shows. It was whimsical and beautiful, and Victoria Beckham said that she would wear any of it. Which, that might not be much for y'all, but it's a pretty big deal. She only wears the best of the best stuff. He is one of the best examples of haute couture. With the more technology that we have a better ability to access more art through the media. And as more access to art has become available, the definition of art has expanded to ridiculous proportions where almost anything can be art. In a museum nowadays, you can go over to the modern section and you'll see a white canvas with a few colorful lines in it, and it'll be called Inside of the Soul. And people think this is art. This isn't art. Art is skillful. It brings out emotion. It has a connection with the audience. This, I don't really see how you can have a connection to it unless you're just kind of faking it and trying to be a scholar of art. I won't really be discussing other forms of art past here because I want to focus mainly on haute couture, and for that matter, women's haute couture. There is men's haute couture, but I don't really know very much about it except for Armani makes really beautiful suits. And so women's haute couture has more to talk about because women wear more intricate stuff. Some of y'all may be asking, where is haute couture's place in the world, let alone the world of art? Is haute couture truly an art form, and what does it contribute to the world? Does it have a purpose that can be considered good, true, and beautiful? And does it deserve our attention and respect, and why? Haute couture is an art form, and therefore is essential to culture and life. There are three spheres. Sorry. There are three spheres of art. There's classical art, which is painting and sculpture, stuff that's been around for thousands of years rather than hundreds of years. And then there is the non-art, which is stuff like Inside of the Soul that I already talked about. And then there's more modern or kind of abstract art. This involves movies, music, fashion, literature. These things have been developed over the last 200, 300 years. Music has been around longer, but the idea of it is more of an art has been around maybe 300 years or so. But this kind of art isn't automatically thought of when someone says the word art. Haute couture fits into this category. It's an art form because, as I said before, it's skillful and it brings out emotion. But it's also in line with God's commandments. It's good haute couture doesn't lead someone to sinful thoughts or deeds. It, instead of disrespecting the feminine body, respects it and shows it in a beautiful way that doesn't reveal too much and shows God's creation in a good way. This is a good purpose in the world because if you're respecting and holding in high esteem God's work and creation without defacing it, it has a good purpose and it should be looked at as such. As with other medias, you do have to kind of toss out the bad stuff and realize that it is a sinful and fallen world, but you must take the good, true, and beautiful fashion for what it is. Without haute couture or any fashion more than togas and tunics, we would still be probably stuck in something similar to togas and tunics. When sewing machines came about, there wasn't much color and there wasn't much fabric that you could get besides that you could create in your own little world. Like here in America, we could pretty much only get cotton, and for the really, really wealthy people, you might be able to get a strip of silk to put as your waistband. But with haute couture, we start out with this gorgeous creation, and it can be toned down, and it inspires the rest of the designers for more commercial designs. It inspires them for that season, and it's toned down for the general public. Dior's new look in 1947 was due to how the lack of fabric has been because of World War II. Women had been stuck in men's pants because they had to run the factories and they didn't have anything beautiful anymore. With his new look, he created a suit for women that involved a skirt. It was a pencil skirt and a beautiful jacket that was fitted for a woman's body instead of a man's body. This paved the way for more designs from Dior that showed how beautiful a woman could look and things that were made for her. We need to realize when we look at haute couture that it is craftsmanship and creativity to one of the highest levels. About his new collection, Dior said, "I wanted my dresses to be constructed, molded upon the curves of the feminine body, whose sweep they would stylize." This was the beginning of haute couture, and that was the first purpose. Many say that haute couture is unnecessary because it is too whimsical and it doesn't really serve a purpose anymore. Dior started it and he led to beautiful fashion, and so there's not really need for anything more extravagant anymore. To this, I would say that with haute couture, it inspires many other designers so that we can wear beautiful things today. It can be toned down for the public, and it still has its purpose to emphasize the feminine form in a beautiful way. The way it lifts up God's work must be recognized and must be seen as a good, true, and beautiful purpose. Some may say that Dior just wanted fame, but I believe that it was truly to show respect to the feminine form. Without haute couture, there would be no new fashion. There would be an empty space in the artistic world. There would be little skill in making what we wear. I have a feeling it would be kind of more close to Parker nowadays, and that would be all that we wear, which is not good, true, and beautiful in any way. Some may say that it is bad and it's purposeless, but I say that something that respects God's creation and takes so much skill and so much time and dedication has to be worthwhile.
I wasn't so we only wear 100% for free polyester.
It was all color coded.
All right, questions for Lindsay?
I know it was so good. It was hard to think of anything to say to it.
You talked about like the need for art to bring out emotion. Is there, and that like I guess bad art or non-art didn't bring out that emotion, but is it I guess possible for there to be a genre that's still art and that it draws out emotion, but bad that it draws out some kind of negative emotion or
Can you give like an example of this kind of art? Or are you talking about what I was describing?
I guess just like even when you're bringing up film, but also in like clothing, where there's certainly craftsmanship and emotion involved in it, but it's not beautiful or it's
Bad
not
emotion.
good. Yeah, so where does that bad emotion fit in the art, I guess?
I would put that in the non-art category still, because according to my definition, I mean, of course I think it's right, it needs to be skillful and something that's good, true, and beautiful. I mean, I know we talk around that phrase a lot, I know I said it a lot, but it's used for a reason, and I think that it needs to show God's creation with fashion and high esteem, and it shouldn't be too revealing, but it shouldn't be ugly, and it shouldn't like be too baggy either. Because I mean, that's just kind of covering up what God has given. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
You talked about how like couture is good because it shows beauty and stuff like that. And then I was just thinking about people's attitudes towards either whether it's greed or covetousness if they don't have it, or if they do a sense of pride of, oh, I'm so great, pride couture. Is that a problem with couture or with the individual?
I think that has to be a problem with the individual, because we are sinful, and so we are going to have pride issues and be but that's why there are commandments against that. could be a problem with couture, but I don't really see it very much as one with couture, but more with the people and the attitude that is developed towards it. In the beginning, couture was something that was held in high esteem, but you weren't snooty about it, because it was something that Dior made to help out women, make them feel beautiful.
Okay, so in our lives, this is strive to be very beautiful. And in regards to the fashion aspect of our lives, throughout the year, it's going to strive for beauty and that. But in a practical sense, in like regards to everyday people who can't sometimes afford high fashion or pop culture, what should we do? What should we do in our lives that is striving for that standard of excellence that you're talking about?
There are beautiful things made for money that is way less than what you would purchase a couture item for. And because couture items inspire pretty much every season, you would be able to get the gist of it from buying what you can afford. Even places like Walmart nowadays doesn't even have too ugly of clothing anymore. Like, it's gotten better. With the idea of vintage is pretty big, and or was last season, vintage was pretty big, and you can even pull out items that maybe your mom or dad wore and kind of fix it up if you don't have a ton of money. Like, you can bring back stuff, because fashion does repeat itself. And I know my mom has said lots of times, oh, I used to have something that looked just like that. And so you can do stuff like that. Simple things.
I'm not exactly sure what my question is, but his idea was new in that they hadn't had such, I guess, high fashion in a while, or was it more his attitude of helping others?
It was a combination of both. Women had skirts and stuff, but I mean, I meant to bring pictures in, but I couldn't find a poster board at my house last night. I totally forgot because I was doing architecture too. But before Dior, it was just kind of a skirt with the waistline that was about up here that just kind of went out, and then a shirt that didn't really fit, didn't really accentuate any curves or anything, and it was just, and usually an apron for the women, because we work in the house. I mean, there's nothing really special about women's clothing. Men had different suits, and they had different styles of suits. They had different fabrics. They had pinstripe or different colors, and so men kind of had better fashion. Than they had hats, and they had belts, and they had suspenders and such. But women were given, with Dior, they were given a better fashion, and they were, Dior was trying to help them, and it was just a good thing overall. It really did.
Before the section came out, obviously, if you looked at France back in the day, it had like, the women had bows in their hair, because that's the kind of fashion they were going for, and like the crazy gowns and stuff like that. What happened to make those here? And then, obviously, you talked about them coming back, but do you have any idea what happened?
I know in France there was the French Revolution, and that kind of killed the Marie Antoinette. I'm guessing that's what you were thinking. Like, it kind of killed the ability for the royals to create such beautiful things because they were kind of in hiding, and they were running away, and they didn't really want they didn't really want their heads getting cut off like for Antoinette, and so they didn't really want seamstresses and tailors to come to their hiding place, I'm guessing. I mean, I haven't really researched, but that just seems kind of why. And there were just more and more wars, and then it kind of had to go back to a simplistic lifestyle, kind of like how we talked about with Mr. Daniels and stuff, how you have so much war for so long, you just have to go back to a simplistic lifestyle of farming until your agriculture gets big enough where you can start having other types of work.
So, like, was New York kind of the first in this line of hot couture? Like, was he kind of the first, or?
He's known, I mean, there could have been someone else, but he's been the one that has stuck around, and whenever you hear about the beginning of haute couture, you hear Dior's new look for women. So yeah, he was pretty much the beginning. What we know today.
So would you say that it's more of a Renaissance idea than a completely new one, kind of reaching back to the, of course, it's modern, but kind of the archaic simplicity of like the 1700s or so?
It could be. I think it is because it's just a natural pattern of life. The more advanced the society gets, the more advanced everything in the society gets, including its fashion. And back in France, before the French Revolution, that society was pretty advanced. I mean, they had incredible fountains, and they had some of them had books, and that for then, that was advanced. Of course, we've come a lot farther today, but I think it's just kind of a natural pattern of life that more advanced the society gets. You don't have to wear just working clothes anymore. You can have several different outfits for different occasions.
How old was Dior when he started making stuff? And then
20s and 30s.
When you first got into it, sorry.
Fine. I was figuring it was early 30s. I suppose.
Lindsay, what would you do with the charge that what you are promoting is elitist and kind of forces a hierarchy on us that, in a lot of ways, we could say is anti, 21st century democracy, egalitarian?
First of all, we told them they were wrong.
So it's not elitist? I mean, you said only.
It can.
I mean, I can't buy one of these dresses for my wife.
What
Right?
happens is
Make one.
people's attitude towards it
Yeah.
that makes it so. Some of it is the designer, but I'm basically saying that if you take the beautiful creations for what they are, they're a piece of art, and they are essential to culture. People have made it an elitist society because it is a sinful and fallen world, and there's bound to, and it's just kind of innate in us to put things in their place as higher or lower, and to make things win or lose. Even a little kid on the playground, when you're playing kickball and saying you're not keeping score, every kid knows what the score is. So it's kind of the depravity of man that has made it so. But I would have to tell them that you need, instead of coming at it with a negative attitude right off, you need to first know what you're talking about. And because a lot of times when someone has a negative attitude about something, they've seen one thing and they don't research it any farther because they're like, oh, this is how it must all be. And so you have to take the beautiful creations for what they are.
Do you think, I think there's a really good
part of his reasoning? Are you
Well,
looking
just in
at-
general,
He goes all over the
well, I
place.
mean, just think about the Republic and the way he typically argues for what we ought to be doing and the way he argues for even how society should be set up. Do you think he would be for or against your argument?
I don't really think he would like the idea of haute couture,
Why?
because his idea of a king is a philosopher king, which is someone who's humble but strong, kind of. And I don't think he would like the idea of the kings being ornate and in a higher fashion than the common people. Because he's supposed to be able to
Yeah.
lead the common people, but also be able to reach down.
What if you were to say, okay, Plato, let's not talk about political justice, but for a minute, let's talk about fashion. Do you think if you changed the topic to fashion, he would like your argument?
If I presented it correctly, he would.
So what about your argument do you think is platonic?
It's a hard question to think about it.
I mean, just go, you go back to the Algorithm of the Cave and think about what if the issue weren't so much goodness itself or justice itself, but were fashion. Does it apply? Who would the cave dwellers be in that, and who would
The cave dwellers would be the people that lack the commercial passion, because it's
Yeah.
not the real thing.
Yeah.
So, if you took it to allegory of the cave level, I think you would like haute couture because it's the real thing. It's the first thing that inspires everything else.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think that, so my two questions are kind of related because, I think that there are a lot of folks who would think that what you're talking about is kind of elitist. I think you're definitely right.